Hello and welcome to the Healed Approach podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Heald, and in this series, in partnership with the Facade Collective, we are going to be focusing on the phenomenal women in construction, highlighting their pivotal roles in an industry where they lead with resilience and innovation. This is a celebration of their achievements and a call to action for true equity in traditionally male-dominated fields. Join us as we uncover the stories of these inspiring women, the challenges they've overcome and the transformative impact they're making. With every story shared, we're constructing a future where everyone has the foundation to build their dreams. Let's embark on this revolutionary journey together. Hello and welcome to the Healed Approach podcast in partnership with the Facade Collective. And today I have got Andrea White here with me. Hello, Andrea, and thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Rebecca. I'm really pleased to be here. Thanks.
Me too, considering that it's summer holidays and had a few technical issues, but thanks for your patience, Andrea. So, Andrea is an independent fire engineer and fire risk assessor with her own consultancy, AW Fire Limited. She is the founder of Women Talking Fire, an independent women's networking and support group for the UK fire safety industry. In 2022, Andrea was voted an influencer within the fire safety industry by, now do you just say those initials, by the way?
IFSEC.
IFSEC. Okay, thank you very much. I meant to ask you that. IFSEC Global. And in 2023, she was voted one of the top 100 most influential women in the construction industry. I actually went to one of their events last week. It was super useful, actually. Really, really good. So, Andrea, I am, as always, super delighted to have you on the podcast. But it is the first time I've had an engineer, a fire engineer on the podcast, and a female fire engineer as well. And I think this is so important. You know, it's so important to get this out there and for people to see what you're doing and to dispel any myths. So on that note, can you tell us what a fire engineer does?
Yeah. I think that's a good question because there's a lot of people that don't know what we do. And it's really quite simple. So we look at fire safety. We look at fire safety in terms of materials, and some of us look at fire safety in terms of building design. So we'll consider things like who will use the building maybe, and what will it be used for, and then we'll give advice regarding fire safety. So we might look at things like how people get out of the building, means of escape, how people are told that there's a fire, means of giving warning, and then we might look at things like compartmentation, which is how the building is split up into smaller units, so that if there's a fire, we don't lose the entire building, we only lose part of the building. And then finally, another aspect that we might look at is fire service access. So if that building had a fire, how could the fire service get to site, have access to site with a fire appliance, and undertake firefighting? So for example, in particularly tall buildings, we'll put extra fire safety measures in so that firefighting is a little bit easier for them than having to run hose up, 20 or so stories up a building. So that's really what we do as fire engineers, yeah.
And that's going to bring me on to our next question. But I do just want to point out at this point that, I think it's really educational for us to be talking about this and to be getting this out there, because again, even when I spoke to you about this before I came on the podcast, but when I spoke about our initial conversation, so obviously we've spoken before, and there were a lot of people commenting on, well, just assuming that you were a fire person, a firewoman,
Firefighter. Well, yeah.
A firefighter. There we go. Thank you very much. And so this is what I mean. I think we need to be, this isn't just about promoting these jobs to young girls, to women. It's also about promoting these jobs to young boys as well, isn't it? Because again, how do they know that this exists?
No. And at the moment, that's a really good point. At the moment, we have way more demand for the work compared to the individuals who are fire engineers. So we'd love to get more anybody, more people into the industry, definitely. Yeah.
I mean, I am doing a bit of work around this about trying to promote engineering in all sorts of, because obviously engineering isn't just engineering. There are lots of different engineering roles, and I think I'm trying to promote that. To schools, and I'm doing some stuff at UK Construction Week, and I've got a young engineer who's going to come in and do some work with me, because I think, that's super powerful as well. So I think definitely, there will be more work to be done on the back of this, because I agree with you. How can we get more? But this isn't just about people, young people not necessarily wanting to come into the industry. This is about young people not knowing what exists within the industry.
Yes. And I mean, I've done a number of career days at schools.
Yeah.
And, I'll put out my stand and my banners and stand there and talk to young people. And generally, they don't know even what engineering is. And all engineering is problem solving. You're just a problem solver. That's the definition of engineering, really. It would be really good to get that message out more and get young people understanding even what engineering is.
Yeah, 100%. And like I say, when I was doing Construction Week, I think there was a bit of a gap there with that. So that's what I'm hoping to bring to it, as well as, promoting diversity and promoting youth. So I've got this brilliant engineer who's in her 20s, who's amazing, and she's going to convert everybody. Anyway.
Fabulous. I'm really pleased to hear that.
She's amazing, actually. But that does bring me on to, well, you're all amazing. You're amazing as well. Everything you're doing, I'm in awe of it all. But that does bring me on to just going back to what you were saying before about, obviously firefighters going into the building and stuff, because Grenfell, I don't think we can do a podcast without talking about Grenfell. That was 7 years ago. Is that right?
It was 7 years ago, just gone. Yeah.
And there are huge ramifications on the back of that. And not just for, for yourselves. I mean, I work with architects, I work with contractors, I work with brick suppliers, and it's had a massive impact across the industry. But what's your perspective on where we are in terms of the fire safety at the moment on the back of that?
Yeah, I mean, so in this country, we have a system called stable door legislation.
Okay.
And what that means is that after we have a tragedy, we'll put in legislation, and we call it stable door because it's after the horse has bolted, if you like. And that's what we're seeing now. I mean, obviously, legislation takes some time to write, but the fact that Grenfell was such a significant tragedy, we lost 72 lives there. We're now seeing significant amounts of legislation coming in to make sure that that sort of issue never happens again. So that has had a huge impact on the industry, and as you say, on almost every aspect of construction, if you like. It's not just the fire safety profession who were affected by that, but the architects and the facade professionals, building control. It's had a huge knock-on effect. So we really are seeing some massive changes in terms of what we're doing and how we're doing it. And it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because whilst I totally agree that we should have things in place to ensure that never happens again. That don't get me wrong, that's without dispute. But I do question whether the amount of legislation that we're putting in is actually going to basically stop us building, is going to mean that we grind to a halt effectively. I think we do have to be proportionate, and that's my concern at the moment, is that there is just so much legislation coming in and so many requirements, and I'm not sure quite how we're going to navigate all that and still produce a building at the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, I know nothing about the fact, well, not nothing. I do work with some facade specialists. I've got clients, obviously the Facade Collective, who I work very closely with. And, we're looking at kind of cladding solutions. We're looking at, windows. I mean, I've even been asked recently about, I think I shared this with you, didn't I? They were asking about the kind of how windows had been fire safety tested. And it's like, again, people, there's a lot of fear, isn't there?
There is.
Around, and, around getting things right. And
Yes.
this as well links, does link to a little bit, I think, to kind of what I'm, more up to speed with it around sustainability, because I think that there are the same issues there as well. I feel like there is so much buzz around sustainability, so many, because everybody's, been scaremongered about the future of the planet. And there's so much legislation in place that for me is almost making it more difficult than it has to be. It's making it more expensive than it has to be.
Yes.
But also as well, I have found that because of the fear in the industry about getting things wrong, people are not always open to more sustainable solutions as much as they should be.
Right.
And it's not just because of the cost. I know that comes up a lot. People go, oh, if you're going to be more sustainable, it's more costly, which is a myth, but that's another podcast. It's also about, well, if we try different things, if we do things differently to what, we're doing after Grenfell or whatever, then is there going to be a higher risk of there being another incident? Or and this isn't just around fire, this is around everything. I don't know how you feel about that, or whether you agree with that.
Yeah, I do. I think extra measures, whatever those are, legislation or processes or registrations for individuals, I think that's all, very logical to have additional measures. But those measures have got to achieve a goal.
Yes.
They've got to be effective. And that's the bit that I'm questioning somewhat.
And you see it, you see people talking it and saying it, but not necessarily doing it. That for me is the worry, because I think, okay, definitely we need guidelines. Definitely we need policy. We do, there needs to be guidance. But if you're literally pushing things and people to a point where people probably don't even understand, I definitely see this as well. People don't really understand, not everybody, that's the wrong thing to say, but a lot of people don't even really understand, for me, what sustainability means, what it looks like. They just know that they've got to tick a box. Even when I go to a networking event now, if I ever talk about sustainability, oh, do you do EDPs? Do you do this? Do you do that? And I'm like, no, because that's not just what sustainability is about. And I imagine it's the same for you as well.
Yeah. So I definitely, you mentioned earlier about fear.
Yeah.
And I definitely see that in order to get something, let's call it signed off, a building signed off, there have been some really interesting discussions. And I think if we're going to have more complicated buildings, from my perspective, which we do have now, we're building in different materials. We're trying to push the envelope in terms of making buildings more interesting from an architectural perspective. And I think if we're going to do that, then we have to have a greater level of competence amongst individuals. And although we've put in some measures, I'm not convinced that we've actually achieved that aim of making sure that people's competency and the level of building complexity marry. Which is what I think we're trying to achieve, and that's the disappointment for me, is we've put in all these extra measures, and I've got no problem with that as long as they then produce the desired outcome.
And I suppose it's like what you said there, it's about the competency, and it's about people understanding. For me, there's a middle ground. For me, it's like I was talking today, even on LinkedIn, about how there is a lack of robust policy and a lack of training. I mean, and I think it's almost the other way around with this. I think the policy is too, it's almost too, what's the word, stringent? I don't know. I'm trying to think of the right word. But then there is a lack of understanding. There's a lack of training. There's a lack of awareness. It's like there's just the intention's there, I guess, but there are too many gaps in it.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think all of the measures that have been, instigated post Grenfell have all been done with the best of intentions.
Of course.
I totally accept that. It's just frustrating that what I'm not seeing is necessarily the outcomes that I think we expected.
Yeah. Well, I think hopefully moving forward, things will, there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in the industry as a whole to try and, because I do think this all comes back as well down to looking at the bigger picture, looking at kind of, what's happening within the industry in terms of diversity, in terms of innovation, creativity. I think if we have more of that, there's going to be better ways of looking at solutions and looking at ways to implement these things, which I didn't even realise brings me on nicely to my next question, which is, not that I had these questions planned out, by the way, but I knew what I wanted to talk to you about, which is, tell me about what it's been like to be a woman in the fire safety world.
Yeah, well, I've been working in this industry for over 25 years now. Came in my mid-20s.
You don't look old enough.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So I started out in looking after buildings, property management, and then I kind of fell into this. And actually, coming back to what you said earlier about firefighting, I joined the fire service to enforce fire safety legislation, and then I trained as a retained firefighter.
Oh, okay.
So I've got a little bit of an understanding of how to fight fires, a little bit. I'm
firefighting every single day with 2 kids, and anyway, sorry, go on.
Yes, the joys of parenthood. I found out enforcing fire safety legislation, I had a skill doing the job, not only just reading the technical documents, but also talking to people and making the sort of the technical into a non-technical form for people who aren't in our industry. But back then, you're right, there weren't many women working in the industry. There's more now, which is great. I'm delighted at that. I think the statistic at the moment for technical professionals, women are about 8% of the industry.
Okay.
So out of every 100 in a room, there'll be about 8 women.
Yeah, it's not enough.
But it is a great job. I can't imagine, I don't want to do anything else for the rest of my career. And it's got a lot of different facets. So there are lots of specialisms even within being a fire engineer. So yeah, there's it's definitely been a very rewarding career for me, definitely.
So when you say different specialisms, can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so you could go into testing. So let's relate it back to Grenfell. At the moment, we're doing lots of tests they're called laboratories, but think of more warehouse-sized laboratories where you test external walls. So think of something sort of 3 stories high, a mock-up of some cladding. You could be working in that sort of environment where you do sort of testing of fire safety measures. You could sit here and look at plans that an architect's drawn and then help them with the design of a building. You could be going out to existing buildings and looking at how a building is being used and doing what we would call fire risk assessments.
Yeah.
You could be looking at construction sites and actually, somebody else maybe has designed the fire safety measures and now the building's being built, and a fire engineer will go onto site and check that what's being built is actually right, what we want. You could have people who focus on human behaviour. So people who will look at large event halls and will look at large numbers of people and how they might respond in a fire situation. There's a huge amount of different sort of different avenues, even in fire engineering, that you can go into.
Yeah, amazing. And if somebody was interested in it, how would they go about it?
Well, there are plenty of apprenticeships now, which is great. You can do a full-time degree in fire engineering. There are a couple of universities in England, and there's one in Scotland that I'm aware of, and I think there's one also over in Ireland. So you can go the degree route, or you can go the apprenticeship route, or you can join the industry perhaps with a slightly related background, maybe in something like health and safety. We have quite a lot of people come into the industry from the military because they have quite a good ability to risk assess things, perhaps sort of more dangerous scenarios, but their risk assessment skills are good. There's I think that's one of the things I quite like about the industry, is that there are different ways that you can come in. There's probably a way for anybody.
Yeah, and that's great as well. I think for anybody who is, like I say, it needs to be. It's not like there's a huge amount of barriers in the way. The only barriers, of course, is a kind of knowing what is available and what is out there.
Yeah, definitely awareness. And I've had numerous conversations with people in the industry that people, potential employees, potential professionals in the industry don't know we exist.
No.
And I think that's our greatest hurdle at the moment, and I'm not quite sure how we get around that. But if we could promote ourselves better, I think that would be a great start to aligning more of that demand with supply.
It is. It's about things like this. It's about, talking more with schools, talking more with teachers. It's just raising the profile, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that I suppose that takes, obviously I know you're doing it and you're here today, and I know you're doing work in schools, and you're doing work on your social media as well. And I think it just, it's collectively getting more people to do that as well, I guess.
Yes.
Yes. And by the way, if you know any of other women in the industry who want to come and talk on the podcast, or we'll talk about that after, actually, because I wonder if there's anybody more local who would do some stuff as well. Because I would love to inspire more young people to come in to into this field, because we need the creativity and the innovation in it.
Yes. They have a different way of thinking, and just because we've always done it this way doesn't mean we always have to do it this way. Maybe there's a better way that we haven't thought about. Yeah, fresh pair of eyes. Absolutely.
Exactly. But having more women in the industry will also help with that.
Yes, it will. It will. We do come with a different perspective.
We do.
We absolutely do. So think when you're designing a building, a block of flats, if we didn't have women involved, this is going to sound a little bit sexist, but, I can remember, my son's 18 now, but I can remember the joys of a pram, and if you've not had that experience of having to take the pram from your flat down to, outside, or where are you going to keep the pram, or, mobility scooters, those sorts of experiences help you to understand what real life living will look like for a greater number of people.
And that's not sexism, or that's reality. That's the whole point of diversity, is that we'll bring a different perspective to it, and a different way of thinking. And I know that is a big issue across. It's not just across construction. It's an issue in a lot of industries. but you do. I know that you are doing some work. I mean, obviously you won an award, and you have a women's network. Is that right?
Yes. So last year I founded Women Talking Fire, and it's an independent networking and support group for women and male allies in the UK fire safety industry. And we have almost 600 members of our LinkedIn group now. Yeah,
Amazing.
so there's a lot of us.
Yeah. So it's Women Talking Fire, but you've got male allies. So what's the percentage?
Yes.
Or roughly?
Oh, 90, more than 95% are, I would say, are women. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we do have some great male allies, but the vast majority of our membership is female. Yeah.
Yeah. See, I talk a little bit about this because obviously because I think while women do need a space, a supportive space, I also feel that we need to be, we do, it's almost like I feel like we need to be now kind of involving more male allies in it as well. And I say that because I think we do need the support of our fellow women. Of course we do. And sometimes we need that to feel safe. But I also think if we're not encouraging, and it's, male allies or just men in general, men that don't understand or don't, I hear it all the time. I'll talk to a man about kind of the experiences that I've had that I just think, oh yeah, well, that's the way it was. I was treated like this when I was pregnant. I've not had this pay rise. I was told this because I was a woman. I didn't get that contract. And it's not just, men and women have held me back in my career. But I think men, unless we talk about it and explain it, they don't actually see what's happening, because I get it all the time. Well, that's not happening. That's not happening in my workplace. I get it on LinkedIn. People say, I don't understand some of your content because that's never been my experience. And I'm like, no, because that's because you're a man. And I'm not, I'm not belittling anything. All I'm saying is that you might not have had a woman who's felt safe enough to open up to you about it. You can't ever understand unless we share and we tell you about these things. The fact that you're telling me that in 20 years of your career, just for example, you've never come across any of this actually worries me, because it makes me think that you've not been seeing it and you've been blinkered towards it. So yeah, I feel like it is so important that I think there's been so much work going on to promote and encourage women, and I think it's amazing. And because I do the same as you, I get involved in women networks. I do mentoring. I'm doing this podcast. I'm getting some male allies on it now, though, as well. But I just think there needs to be some unity as well. We need to look more at how we're going to unite all of that.
Yes. I think unity and uniting is a really good way of describing it. And it's really interesting you say that, because I've recently come to the same conclusion. When I started the group, I was really keen to find other women in the industry, because during the pandemic, I realized I didn't have any other women in my phone book. I didn't know any other women in the industry.
Yeah.
And I knew they had to be out there. So now, we've done that, and that's great. We've brought women together so that they can, share experiences, and, they're able to relate to each other. And that's fantastic. I'm really proud of that. However, what you're saying, I totally agree with. What we found is that the male perspective is that this isn't a problem. And in fact, in May, we did a survey. So we did a short survey, and the responses were just broadly, the women who responded felt that, they had, most of them, the vast majority of them had the experiences that you've just talked about, and could appreciate those issues. And then of the men, the majority of the men, not all, but the majority of the men said there isn't a problem.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, how do we help you to understand that, there is a problem? Is it that we're telling you and you're just refusing to accept that because it's not your experience?
I think there's an element of that.
Or is it that you genuinely haven't heard our experiences? Because they are two different things, aren't they?
Absolutely. And I've had this conversation several times. And I do think it's a combination. I do think that there are people out there. I mean, and it's not just exclusive to men, because there are women as well who will refuse to acknowledge that there's any issues, and that's great for them. But I do think it is a combination of men and women potentially not afraid of change, afraid maybe of thinking that they're going to lose some kind of power, which is kind of almost perverse and ironic, because actually the opposite will happen, and but then I also think there are just men that just haven't seen it or haven't heard it, but if they do, they would be open to understanding and listening and doing things. And I also think there are men, and this is why I'm trying to get more men on the podcast to talk about this, because I do think there are men that do see it and do understand it, but don't always know what action to take.
Yes.
And then they see, all of these networks, all of these women coming together, and they kind of think, oh, well, they're getting on with it. I think there's two sides to it. It's like, oh, they're getting on with it, I'll leave them to it, they're empowering each other. Or, oh God, what are they doing? They're just making a mountain out of a molehill. And for me, I think what started off as something that's really important and really necessary, and continues to be really important and necessary, could divide us further.
Yes.
If we don't kind of think about a way forward with this.
Yes, I completely agree. And that's what I'm saying, is that it's a topic that seems to become quite divisive.
Yes.
And that's not what I'm trying to achieve. But I'm at the point where I'm not too sure how to change that narrative so that it doesn't end up being divisive. It's interesting. I was commenting on a LinkedIn post, and there was a man on there commenting, and it got quite frustrating, not between me and the man, but the man and the author of the post. They clearly got quite frustrated with each other. And what I said to this chap was, can we have a chat? Can we do a video call? Because I want to understand your perspective, but I'm not quite understanding it yet. But I think it's important that I do, because you're willing to speak your mind. You're willing to talk about this topic. And I want to understand your perspective. And I kind of, that's what I'm hoping. What do they say? Be the change. If I'm willing to understand their perspective, then I'm kind of hoping that might set the tone for them being more willing to understand and accept my perspective.
100%. And I'm looking at this. I'm hoping to do some work on this with a couple of other people, and because we're looking at, and I think one of the things that we're going to do first is to look at how we can understand the perspective as well of men as well as women, so that we can find a path forward.
Yeah.
So watch this space, because I definitely am going to be in touch with some of your information around your survey as well, because it is important work. Yeah. And I think we need to just take action rather than be afraid of how to take it, or not afraid, but sometimes we can sit back and go, I don't know how to navigate this. And I feel the same, and I felt the same. And I thought, we've just got to get the ball rolling. We've just got to have these conversations. What you're doing, having those conversations with men that are happy. I've done the same. I've managed to get 2, 3, 4 men so far to come on my podcast.
Great.
Because I've just seen, right, I can see you're someone who's open to talk about this. Will you do it openly so we can share it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the other things that I've done is I heard a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and the guest on there was someone, it's a man who actually, he's English, but he lives in America now, who's a researcher on this topic. About sort of the male perspective of all this sort of feminism and gender diversity and all the rest of it. And he's written a book. So I bought the book because I wanted to read and understand his perspective, and in doing that, I can see some of his points, and I'm not a man, so I haven't had those experiences. And it was helpful to understand that, actually men have got some challenges too. They're different from ours.
Yes, exactly.
But now I think I've got a better understanding of some of those challenges. So now I can perhaps be, more empathetic to those challenges, because I that wasn't my lived experience. I didn't know about those issues. So I do think it's about curiosity and being willing to accept that your experience, your lived experience, isn't necessarily everybody's lived experience, and being willing to hear other people's and accept that is their truth.
Yeah. I mean, that's happened to me just this week, over the weekend, with some of my content, and hearing people's experiences, how they see kind of, the way that I do things. It's kind of also taking that feedback and listening to it and getting curious about it. But we can do that no matter man, woman, however we identify.
Yeah.
And I think we absolutely, as women, need to be open and curious to that as well, rather than just thinking, it's a man's world and we're being treated badly. Yeah, we are, but we need to find a way forward.
Yes.
Just before we wrap it up, what's the name of the book?
Oh, the book, I've got it here. It's Of Boys and Men, and it's by Richard Reeves, and I thoroughly recommend it. It's a really interesting read. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Catherine, can you go out one sec? Come on. Oh, that's funny. She's frozen on the screen now, hasn't she?
She has.
Oh, well, I tell you what, that is podcasting in its fullest. So Catherine and I are doing a podcast after this with somebody else to talk about. Actually, that's quite a nice kind of lead on, because we're going to be talking about exactly how we can move forward and develop what we're thinking about around allyship. So that book, definitely, that's super, super interesting. I'm definitely going to look at that. Although I must admit, I'm terrible with reading books at the minute, especially with it's just like I can read a couple of chapters and then put it down. So I might have to get it on audio.
Yes.
But yeah. Well, I think
the pleasure. I think the only other thing I would say is that it's really important to have those conversations. But I also think we need to do better at disagreeing more agreeably.
Absolutely.
I think that's a really important part. That's the bit I'm not seeing is, people are offering constructive criticism, and it's not, we seem to, as a society at the moment, have lost the ability to take that in the spirit with which it was given. And I think we need to find a way where people aren't frightened to speak up because of the backlash when they have something, worth saying. We definitely need to learn to, we need to get better at disagreeing more agreeably.
Absolutely. And I advocate for that. And I think a lot of it comes down to fear and ego.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is a whole topic in and of itself. Because I've experienced this, and I am absolutely open to healthy discussion and, differences of opinions, but I just think there's a way of doing it as well.
Yes.
So if we're going to have that healthy debate, it's how we present that and then how we lead into that discussion. Because I've got to admit that if somebody's going to come at me in an aggressive way, it's going to get my back up and I'm not going to be able to have that healthy debate. Whereas if somebody, I'm always open. I love learning. I love growing. Mm-hmm. And I know I've got a lot to learn. And I know I've got, and I think you're absolutely right. Again, though, this is why we're not being able to move forward with so many things, because we're not facilitating that curious debate, which again, is potentially because of the lack of diversity too.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I think we need to be more accepting and understanding that, people might not do a very good job of explaining it, and we don't need to, get annoyed with them that actually they're trying their best. I think we just need to be more understanding and more empathetic when people do try and enter the conversations, definitely.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Andrea, can you let people know where they can find you?
Yes. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Andrea White, Fire Engineer. My company is called AW Fire. So you can type www.awfire.co.uk, and Women Talking Fire are on LinkedIn, and they have their own website, which is womentalkingfire.co.uk. Fabulous. Thanks ever so much, Rebecca. I think what you're doing is absolutely fantastic. Really, really do wholeheartedly support what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Likewise. And anybody who is listening, who's also supportive, please make sure that you do share this podcast, leave us a 5-star review, and make sure that you do go and check Andrea out and talk about her to anybody that this might be of an interest to. The more that we can promote what we're doing, what Andrea's doing, the better. So thank you so much, and continue the good work. And everybody who's listening, I'll see you here next time. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for joining us in celebrating the trailblazing women in construction. Today's discussions have not only illuminated the remarkable contributions of our guests, but have also reinforced our commitment to fostering a workspace that honours diversity, champions equality and nurtures innovation. Through our collaborative efforts with the Facade Collective, we are reminded that every contribution in construction is a step towards a more inclusive and equitable industry. Let the stories of these courageous women inspire us all to continue building a future where gender is no longer a barrier to success, but a testament to our collective strength and diversity. Until next time, let's keep pushing boundaries, breaking barriers, and leading the charge towards a more equitable and inclusive world.